All right, so back to our regularly scheduled program. This is where I introduce our speaker. As I mentioned before, he designed this net-zero project that I mentioned before during his tenure at Perkins & Will. And since he has moved on to become the Director of Sustainability and Building Performance at Eskew plus Dumez plus Ripple, an architecture firm that brands himself as a multidisciplinary design studio, which is really exciting. So at his position, he draws upon his wide range of experience, of both professional and academic experience in architecture, physics, informational technology, and renewable energy. And so Z plays a directorial role at his firm as the Director of Sustainability and Building Performance. He is a board member of the U.S. UBC Louisiana chapter. He's an adjunct professor at the Tulane School of Architecture. And he is also my professional hero, mentor, and role model. I'm not aware of the mentor part yet, but we'll get to that later. Don't worry. So to set the stage for today's presentation, I want to go ahead and read an excerpt from his firm's website on their sustainability design philosophy. I was kind of poking around the websites, as I do with most of our speakers, and I was really inspired by their kind of written narrative of how they approach design. I just wanted to read an excerpt to kind of show that this is exactly what we were looking for when we tried to design this particular session. So it says, I quote, "We believe that design excellence combines beauty, function, economy, and energy performance. To that end, we challenge our staff to base design decisions on an analysis of site and climate, to minimize energy and water use, and consider the consequences of material choices on the health of occupants, the greater community, and the environment itself. Some call this approach sustainable design. We believe it's simply good design." So with that, would you please help me welcome our guest, Boise.
Is this guy? Do you have to convert me or something? So let's just do it. Okay. Is this thing on? Yes, this thing's on. Okay, then the next thing I need to do is just hit, that's good. And great. So thank you very much, Integrated Design Lab, Kevin and everyone there. And also thank you to Idaho Power for sponsoring this. It's, I think, the first time I've been to Idaho since I took a transcontinental train trip 25 years ago and got off in, I think it stopped in Butte at the time, and wandered around for an hour while the train stopped, and that's my exposure. That and some camping in the Snake River Canyon. But it's just amazingly beautiful here, and it's so dry here. Having lived in New Orleans for the last 4.5 years of my life, I've gotten used to being permanently pickled in the humidity of that region. So the kind of, the non-vegans in the crowd, what's for meat in this presentation? I'll be talking about the surge building, but I'll be trying to put this in the context of a larger set of goals, which is talking about, in general, where we're all trying to go in terms of better performance and better comfort for people in buildings, and all the ways that can go right and go wrong. And this is kind of one case study at the heart of the presentation, but I'll talk about putting this what I've learned from this project and how I've carried that forward into a firm where, you know, here I was living for 4 years in Vancouver, where the ethos, you know, everyone's trying to out-green everybody else. The only way that Walmart could get permission to ever come close to Vancouver was their commitment to build, you know, Platinum Walmart, that sort of thing. So the ethos is very much that way. Moving to Louisiana, the ethos is a little bit different. And so we used to joke when they gave me my title that I would make 2 sets of business cards. I'd be the Director of Sustainability when traveling, and I'd be the Director of Performance when at home, because that's what plays well with the home crowd. I don't see those things as, you know, as actually competing, but they're just a sort of good way of talking about the same kinds of issues. So this project was my final project that I led the team on in 2008, 2009. It was constructed in 2010 and 2011. I got out of town just as they started breaking ground. I left all the CA work to my second team member, suffered through it. It just received its LEED Platinum rating, and it's still working through its paperwork on the Living Building Challenge. How many people have heard of the Living Building Challenge? Do you? Right. So I'll talk a little bit about that, not too much, but in context. That was then. This is now. I'm now at Eskew Dumez Ripple. So whereas Busby, Perkins, and Will was a 60-person outpost of a 1,500 staff member international firm, Eskew, Dumez, Ripple is a 40 to 50 member firm based in New Orleans. It has done work as near to here as we did a fish research center in Bozeman, but we've done projects in South Carolina and so on. But since Katrina, we've been really busy, and so essentially 100% of our work became focused in New Orleans. And Jake, is there any way to turn down the volume just a little bit? Thanks. That said, we are now, as they say, taking clients nationally and internationally. And we just started working on a project in Sao Paulo. We did some work in Connecticut. We hear good opportunities here. I know some of your architects here. We'd love to work with you on projects up here as well. Now that I've learned how to navigate how you get here for the work, just as everything else, you go through Salt Lake. When I got to New Orleans and worked on this project, this is my first project. It was a building that was already designed and had bought on hold, and then came off hold when the funding aligned back up. And the owner said, "Yeah, by the way, could you do that LEED thing too?" And so this was a 100% construction documents project, and we went back and did a reanalysis of it and turned it into a legal project, which sort of flies in the face of everything we've all been taught about sustainable design. I guess what it says is if you get the bones of the building right, you can kind of tune it on up. So first what I want to do is I'm going to be throwing around this term, so I want to just make sure everybody's caught up on the same term, EUI, energy use intensity. So this is how we keep score. EDR is a signatory to the 2030 challenge and the 2030 commitment, which means we're measuring all of the work we do in our portfolio and trying to kind of do the limbo in the years going forward of dropping the energy use that each project does in successive years. But just to go over a little bit of scary numbers right at the beginning, all an EUI does is it tries to find a way, if you have a house and you have an electric bill, this is the average American household using 12,000 kilowatt hours of electricity and 800 CCF of gas, how do you talk about how much energy it uses in total? So you can convert gas to BTUs and electricity to BTUs, and then divide it by the floor area of a 2,000 square foot house, and you get 60 kilobitu's per square foot per year. So that metric is sort of the gold standard for one simple, it does violence to some of the subtleties of architecture, but it's a good way to just kind of try to keep track. We try to keep track of everything. So this is a sampling of our portfolio, and it's trying to embody as a firm where we're going, where, to us it matters that things are beautiful. The most sustainable building is the one that is so beautiful people fight and get it torn down. The least sustainable building is the building so unloved that people don't care. People won't take care of it, and it does get torn down. So to us, beauty matters, but also performance. So in each box here, you'll see a photograph of a project. You'll see in yellow what the median energy use intensity for that building type is. In this case, it's a large multifamily apartment building in downtown New Orleans. And then this is what we measured the actual performance, not what the energy model said, but what we measured the actual energy use of that building. And what you also see is there's lots of different building types out there with different numbers. This is, in fact, that Bozeman Research Center. That's our own office project there, where we did retrofits inside a 30-story office building. And this is the 2030 commitment that says we're going to take 2003 as our baseline, and whatever the average was of all from the government survey of, say, multifamily residential or single-family residential or offices, this is the average energy use per square foot. This is nationwide. In some cases, when there's enough of that kind of a building, you can slice it and dice it. So I just want to talk about buildings in the Northwest, or I just want to talk about buildings in hot humid climates. So, but what you see here is that, of course, different building types have very different energies. In fact, the killers we do work on laboratories. Laboratories, because they have lots of equipment and lots of air, tend to have a lot of higher energy use. Firms that sign up to the 2030 commitment and the AIA have accepted this goal of trying to get their buildings to be 60% below the average building in the building stock in 2003 as reported. And then that ratchets up every 5 years and gets tougher and tougher. Now, a lot of firms have signed up to this. Very few firms have succeeded in hitting this target. But the important thing is I call this the pencil diet. It's the one diet if you want to lose weight that works. You eat whatever you want so long as you write it down. Right? And so you say, I did have that cookie talk, so I'm going to write it down. So if you just have to face, you eat whatever you want, you have to face yourself in the mirror and say, yeah, that's what I did. So to me, the virtue of being signed up to the 2030 commitment is that we track, and then we have to face. And when we look at a building that didn't perform as well as we hoped, we have to sort of say, and now we know why. So how do we get there? Well, the recent budget battles go on unresolved in Washington, but we all know that if you're trying to balance, you can either raise revenue or cut spending. And the only ways to get to zero, to get into balance, to do all of one or some of both, and so on. So the same thing's true, obviously, for buildings. We can either make buildings more efficient, or we can generate more power. We can have a Hummer and cover it with solar panels, or we can, we can try to make a building that's so tight on its energy use that it only needs 1 or 2 solar panels, and so on. This is my own house. This is an 1880 shotgun Camelback, as the local folks call it. Camelback means it pops up on the second floor due to an eccentricity of the tax code where you were taxed by how many stories your building was at the street. And so everybody built the second floor 30 feet back. And so the buildings have Camelbacks. Anyway, it's a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom house. And when we moved in, we took data for a year, and we got a HERS rating, the Home Energy Rating System score. 100 means if you build to current building code, how much energy, if you took that total and built to the current building code with recommended levels of insulation, efficiency, and so on, you get a score of 100. And our house had a score of 188, and we spent $2,000 a year on utilities. For a series of insulation and upgrading the heating and cooling system, which we did not to save energy, we did it entirely because the coldest winter I ever experienced was in New Orleans. I've lived in San Francisco, I've lived in Ashland, Wisconsin, I've lived in Canada. The coldest winter I experienced, because they're all we're really good in New Orleans. We live in denial better than anybody else. We have to live where we live, right? And so we're in denial that we ever have winter. So when it's 30 degrees out, people have these wussy heating systems that have no concept of how to actually make a place comfortable. So we wanted to rework the whole HVAC system to make it comfortable and to make the building leak less. So we took our HERS score to 77. And then on this little southern, you can see that little lip there, on the little pop-up, we have about 300 square feet of solar panels, and that dropped it from there to there. So if we just glued solar panels on top of a sucky building, we'd be still up here, right? So the main step was to make an efficient building, and then bring down some of the offset with solar panels. Now, there's still some roof left. We can buy small panels and so on. But it's just sort of illustrating the idea that, how this house works is, when we're not there in the middle of the day, solar panels are pumping out power, and it's actually exporting and helping the local region. Everybody else's air conditioners run. When we come home at night, obviously the solar panels are not generating any power, so we're buying power from the grid. And so that net is how we get towards net zero. True net zero is when those two things balance out. Why don't we? Now, I think you have some people here talking about the Bullitt Foundation. This is the Bullitt Foundation building in Seattle. This is done by Miller Hall. Now, what I want to say is, as much as I'm an advocate for, again, trying to go for net zero, obviously it's kind of a trap, isn't it? Because it's really easy if you build like one-story buildings that have low typical energy consumption per square foot, like single-family residences. You can always slather enough solar panels on top to get to net zero. On the other hand, if you build a multi-story building, and especially if you do building types that tend to use a lot of energy per square foot in their consumption patterns, it's going to get hard. And I love Miller Hall, and so don't put me out of context, but this building is an acquired taste. I think it's the fairest thing to say. When you look at it, it does sort of seem like something landed on top of it. This is sort of the limit where they try to grab as much solar energy as they can with all the solar panels glued on top. One of my favorite, I teach architects. This is one of my favorite cartoons for trying to get architects to not be afraid of numbers. So if we say that a typical today's solar panels can generate in a year, you put a square foot solar panel on the roof of a building, it'll depend which one you bought, which angle it's at a little bit, but more or less, you'll collect about 30 kilowatt hours from that square foot solar panels. And you just convert kilowatt hours into kBTUs, because that's the units we like to use for everything else. It's about 3.4 times that is this. So it's about 100 kBTU per square foot per year. So what that means is if I've got this much rooftop, if I build a one-story building, I can get to net zero by just covering the roof. Not a very hard building to do. I can make 2 stories. And we said, like, residences, it's pretty easy to make a 50 kVtu per square foot for your 2-story house or apartment building. That's good. But then I go to 4 stories, or I go like the bullet foundation to a 6-story building, right? So what happens is I run out of roof, and that's why they try to kind of steal some roofs from the adjacent streetscape. So sometimes it feels a little bit like foolish, but like you're trying too hard to win the science fair by exactly balancing your power. Because in the end, the bullet foundation, they made an interesting choice. This ground floor was supposed to be, of course, a Starbucks, right? It's Seattle, right? It's supposed to be a coffee shop. I'm sure it's actually going to be a little bit silly. I didn't know that they could grow coffee there. But it was going to be a cafe. But the problem is the highest energy use per square foot of any building type tracked in the CVEX database is fast food retail. Because of all the intensity of all that stuff going all day long. And so they said, gee, if we put a cafe down here, it's going to blow our energy budget, and we've run out of room for solar panels. So they said, no, that's going to be office, because otherwise we can't get to net zero and run all this stuff. And now, urbanistically, that ought to be a cafe, right? We want to enliven the street as architects or as citizens. We want live street. They made this choice because they're trying to make an emblematic building, right? But so I don't blame them. I'm just saying that if you're kind of pulled foolishly to this, it must be exactly the net zero target for our buildings. It kind of can skew our decision making. So renewables, though, the good news is they're coming on strong. If I keep this track, there's this thing. It's called the log law of learning. If you take mice and stick them in a maze and you time them, how long it takes to go, you time them again, you time them again. What happens is for every factor of 10 more times they've done it, or factor of 2, it's a logarithmic function, they keep learning, and what they progressively learn is, less and less and less. You have to plot it on a log chart. That's true not just of how rats learn mazes. It's also true of how we learn to do anything. You take the price of chicken eggs in constant dollars from 1920 to the year 2000, it falls at 2% per year. Now, what that comes from is we've learned how to be progressively less and less nice to our chickens, right? Chicken batteries, but it's technology marching on, and people figuring out how to squeeze out little bits of performance because learning happens. Well, learning happens in manufacturing. It's why, in my phone I have more computing power than went to the moon with the Apollo astronauts. So this is a chart this is watching the logarithmic growth in the total installed capacity. This is wind power. This is worldwide. And these are solar photovoltaics, solar panels. And what's interesting is that wind power has been growing it's got a head start, but it's been growing at 25% per year for more than a decade. Solar panels have been growing at 56% per year for over a decade. And up here, though, is the total worldwide installed electric generating capacity. And this line, just because it's a logarithmic chart, I just dropped down in the same place in parallel. That's 10% of that number. So the question is, right today, you go, solar power, wind power, it's not, it barely even shows up with the noise on our world generating power. That's true. But that's the nature of exponential growth. Right? You don't notice it until 2 generations before it takes to not see growth. And so there's this great Saudi, I meant to get the quote and put it up here. It's a sheikh of some oil fiefdom in the Middle East that said, the Stone Age did not end because they ran out of stone. The oil age will not end because we run out of oil. What will happen is something else will supplant it. And so this stuff is just coming up as we learn and bring down the price and so on. So that's happening. So in fact, this is a chart of how much modules, just finding modules, not putting them on the roof, not paying for the inverters and all that stuff. These are starting in 1980 to 2010, 30 years of data. And yeah, there's a little bit of wiggle, but it's basically 7% per year. Every year, the real price of solar panel modules drops by 7%. The interesting thing is the technology about what's here, it has nothing to do with the technology that's here. You can't predict which technology will win. You just know that someone will run in with their lab coat on and say, I have the breakthrough, and the little man will say, oh, good, we were waiting for you. Here's where your next data point comes. So this is the price of modules. This is the price of installed systems. The full systems, the price of racks have not fallen as fast, right? But the price of installed systems has basically fallen in half over the last dozen years. So that's happening. And one of the things that's driving it is just know-how. The other thing is, of course, the technology is getting a little bit more efficient. So in my previous life, I was a physicist, and I worked at RCA Labs on these amorphous solar cells. And we got to there when I decided, I did some thermodynamic calculations and said, this technology is going to top out at about 15%. And I'm not sure I want to spend the next 30 years of my life in that lab. So I'll let someone else have that fun, and I'll go do something else, which turned out to be 2 years later architecture. But the technology marches on, new technology is happening. There are now solar cells getting 44%, converting 44% of the sun's light into electricity. So there's amazing progress happening, but it does take decades. Again, we don't need to know what the technology is. We know the technology the future will be given. We know that the time curve will keep being followed. So the good news is that happening on the source side. Of course, what we're all missing is storage. It's starting this year, because it started out in laptops and then electric cars. Now Panasonic has started selling in Japan and in Germany. This is a little widget that sits in your utility closet, and it's a 4 to 8 kilowatt-hour electric storage system, electricity storage system. So this is a lot easier to scale, putting this in a lot of places. They're also building banks for power plants just to provide more grid stability. But as this system starts to mix with these solar panels, we're going to see some interesting things happen. Again, it's not about making it autonomous. It's about making it really smart here. But so net zero energy, obviously, what we're concerned environmentally, energy is a huge driver, but it's not the only driver. And as we move down this path in next use, we building council, I'm serving on the board of the U.S. Building Council of Louisiana. We use LEED as the way of tracking both energy, water, and site impacts, transportation impacts, and so on. But in all of these things, we start out, well, here's code minimum. Any worse, it would be illegal. And in some sense, LEED and some of these things, we're trying to reward people for making things less bad. This is a spiel I stole in building down. And he says, and then we said, well, our ideal is to get to sustainability. So you're married, Kevin, right? Would you say your relationship with your wife is sustainable?
It's better than less bad.
Okay. If the best you can say about your relationship with your significant other is that it's sustainable, it's not getting any worse, right? That's not much to aspire to, is it? Right? We want something that's just makes us feel better and better. It means every day is better than the previous one. And so in some sense, as designers, where we're trying to move towards is this notion of start out, yes, make it less bad, then yes, get to net zero. Well, we want projects to be regenerative. We want them to take a site and make it better than it was before we got it.
More comment.
Yeah.
We're having a little bit of trouble on the webinar with the sound. Just stay
in one place.
Area.
Will that help?
I move around a lot too when I talk, but
okay. Right here.
From here
is this
down,
the safe zone?
That would be good.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll be safe.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So with that setting, we're now ready for the main course, the research building, the Center for Interactive Research on Sustainability. So this project was first conceived by the director at UBC, Dr. John Robinson, in 2000. By the time the project had come to my hands in 2008, it was the third iteration. The first two iterations, they tried to build a kind of consortium between 5 universities, some of them what you do for a living. And the problem is they all had conflicting goals, and who's going to get credit, and what's going to happen, and all this stuff. And finally, the third time around, one of the major donors said, if you don't start building within a year, we're just pulling our chunk of change back out. So it said, okay, we'll build it at the UBC campus. So it changed sites, and they gave the project to LEED. And they said, okay, this is all you have to do, Steve. It has to be a living lab that accelerates sustainability. It has to be a healthy place to work. It has to be net zero energy. It has to be carbon negative in its operation. It has to have low carbon construction, be net zero water use, a net gain in landscaped area, not contain any toxic materials that are on a precautionary red list of things that have been suspected that might cause cancer. And you can't use any of those materials. And it can't cost any more than your budget is we've taken the average cost of construction at UBC for the last 5 years per square foot. That's your budget. This sounds great. So here's the site. Here's the site. This is UBC. The main city of Vancouver is kind of here. There's the University Trust lands. This is the mouth of the Fraser River down here, which you can't see. And when they do the felling, their forestry, they just send the logs down the river, and then they get pulled up here, they put little tags on them to say it's my law, my law. And they all pull up here, and then they're taken off to sawmills from there. So when I found this aerial photograph, there was, to me, a clue that later shows up in the design decisions, and here's the site. So here's the site that we were given. It had a one-story warehouse building that was built in the 20s. It was all wood construction. And I said, so what is this building used for? And they said, this is where whenever people are moving offices, is where we move the stuff. It's a swamp space. And whenever people are vacating through renovations, they move stuff in here and move it back out. And I said, well, where's that function going now that we're going to build our brand new shiny building on this side? And they said, oh, we're going to rent some space out in Paterson, which is like 25 miles away. We're just going to run a shuttle back and forth every morning. And I said, I'm not sure that's quite consistent with our sustainability goals. So the first thing I did was try to convince them, do a series of studies to convince them to let us build a basement in this building, which basically replaced, because obviously stored desks do not need daylight or fresh air. So let's replace that function, drop it down. We disassemble this building board by board, and you'll see it show back up in the final building. So this was the site. They have something we don't have in Louisiana. They have hills, and as much as you do sectional change, this is sort of a story and a half higher than here. This boulevard here is about 15, 20 feet below this boulevard up here, and this is the site of that warehouse. And so we looked at what we could do, orienting the building, and so on. I'll go into that a little bit. But we were told one of the challenges was somebody had poured a sidewalk. They said, here's your site, and you've got to put 60,000 square feet of program on this 15,000 square foot site. But actually, you don't get the whole site because there's this accessible path of travel for how you get up to the rest of the campus. This is wheelchair, this is a 5% slope, so you can't block that. And that's why the massing of the building has a foot, a little glass sliver that comes down to not block that accessible path of travel. They said, this is terrible. I said, this is wonderful. Because what this will mean is that all the people heading up to their classes, not just people in wheelchairs, everybody took this path. We'll go right by, and this will be kind of our storefront of how we talk to the world. And then this thing, they said, well, is that where the Starbucks go? Because in the program there was a cafe. I said, no, that's where the sewage treatment plant goes. And they said, why? And I said, because then it will have to be beautiful. It's going to be the most beautiful, it's going to be the most prominent part of our building. So here's the floor plan. The main massing was to run, what we wanted to do was run the main massing east. We have a square site. You know, the easiest thing to learn in architecture, sustainable architecture 101 is, right? We want to make big, long, thin buildings that all run east to west. So all the glass is either north, where we don't have to worry about shading, or south, so a little overhang, and the summer sun can be blocked, and the winter sun can come in and keep the building moist. So that's, the problem is none of our clients give us sites that are like 500 feet long and 30 feet wide. So we have a square site. So I said, okay, what we'll do is, this is a kind of a 1920s way of thinking about how building massing goes. So we'll make a courtyard building. They said, oh, one of the ways, just as the project started up, they said, to make the economics go, the university had just acquired some money to build a 500-seat lecture theater somewhere on campus. And we decided it will be what anchors your funding for your building, for your net-zero building. You're going to have a 500-seat lecture theater that is going to run all day long, and it has to have a cafe and washroom facilities for 500 students changing every hour and a half.
Great opportunity.
Exactly. I did not complain, but I said, great, this is good. So what we did was we ran the massing running east-west so that we get the north-south glazing and shading and so on. We have a 500-seat lecture theater. We're built on a hillside, so that's good because we have accessible wheelchair access for here, or you can, folks in wheelchairs can sit either at the back or at the front or the middle and end up wherever they like. This is the sewage treatment plant. And then this is the kind of court, the main entry lobby that kind of wraps itself up and becomes the commons for the building. So we do have some west-facing glass because one of our targets in Vancouver was no air conditioning. And yet we'd like to have, because this was the street, we wanted to have a prominent, nice facade. So I'll talk a little bit about how we dealt with it. We control some west facade. But one of the things that I'm pleased with in how buildings turned out is its relationship between public spaces and green spaces. So everybody likes to have green roofs. There's a very famous, the Vancouver Public Library has this very famous green roof that nobody who visits the Vancouver Public Library can see because it's and they don't want people up on the roof and jump off and whatever in the middle of downtown. So what I said was, let's put the green roof down here where everybody can see it. It's the lid on the auditorium. And we'll use the high roof for doing what roofs can do what we don't want people there, which is collect rainwater for drinking and collect solar energy. And then there's this notion of how water works through the site. This street that wraps by was called sustainability, which had a whole bunch of examples of novel technologies approaching dealing with rainwater and so on. And then but the idea was that wherever you were in the building, you were reconnected to habitat. So we did, I think it's, this is the world's strangest, this is the landscape architecture way of drawing the building. This is all the things that could have green in them, superimposed as if they were in one plane. So up on the high roof, there were plots laid out for people doing green roof studies, although most of these have not yet been implemented. It's sort of only one or two. Mostly we're using the main roof, which is a sort of U-shape for rainwater collection. This is the green roof here, over the main green roof over the auditorium. And this is the sort of at-grade landscaping. And you can see that a little more clear here in this, this is kind of the Revit model on steroids showing you the building, again, the auditorium, the commons area for informal meetings, and the sewage treatment plant. This is called solar aquatics biofiltration. So this is a system where it's a technology borrowed from cruise ships, which can actually treat their waste. And but the final stage of the material is usually enhanced with nutrients that dump it in the ocean. It's just natural, expert phosphorus and potassium and so on. But you can use plants floating in that water to do the final water polishing stage. And so that's happening here. And what we do is that the system is designed that they capture the rainwater. It gets filtered and processed. It's suitable for drinking. But then all of the wastewater from toilets and so on gets processed, and that is what goes back into refilling the toilets. So we didn't have to make low-flow toilets because we have so much water in this building. The main demand for water is the primary, the good water that gets used in the cafe. This is sort of interesting. When the diagram first came back from the engineer, I said, oh, there's one mistake. I like the diagram. There's this one mistake, though, because you've got this arrow to the city sewer system going both directions. Can you explain that to me? And because you needed to have it when the system was shut down and also when the building was first opening, you needed to be able to tie into the passing campus sewer line and flush things into there. And they said, well, the problem is that UBC shuts down for up to 6 weeks in the summer. And we don't want the little beasties that do all the digesting of the wastewater to die for lack of food. So we actually need to be able to draw sewage into the system and process it to keep the little microorganisms happy and alive. So this is that green roof. This is an intensive, I always forget the name, intensive except it's thick. It's 18 inches thick soil. Floating on top, so we can plant all kinds of habitat on here. And then we have these ribbons of skylights that wash natural light into even the auditorium. Is naturally lit by wall washing on the sides there. And the structural system is interesting. So I attended the project. I go to this workshop where Peter Busby's there, flying internationally around. And we're getting on a little bus to head back to the airport. And I'm going one way and he's going the other. And he says, make it all out of wood. And then the door closes. And I said, no, wait. This is the first-story building. We can't do this. We can't do it. Well, so I got to learn how to mill, and now there's increasingly the bullet foundation building works in this direction and so on. This is a 4-story building that is entirely wood frame. It is a glulam moment frame building. So if you think of building a steel moment frame building, we now build it out of glulams for both columns and those east-west bars are 10 meters, 30 feet wide. And so we just have 30-foot glulams running this way. They tie into the vertical glulams, which act as columns. And then there's basically a 4x8 sheet of plywood making a skin box, which is the shear head. Now, then the wood, the floor slabs, these things are spaced 10 feet apart. The floor slabs are just 2x4s, end on, nailed together. So the floor slabs are only 3.5 inches thick. So the odd thing about this structure, though, as the code consultant was informing me, was that when you build a steel frame building, it's not fireproof until you fireproof it. And while you're in the middle of construction, so you do the spray fireproofing, right? If there were to be a fire during construction, you have a problem. This building is fireproof from the day they have the frame up, because how a heavy wood building fireproofs itself is char, right? Because the wood will only go into half an inch, and then it's coated with that char. calculating thickness of carbon, and it won't burn anything. And that's true even of these floor slabs. They did all kinds of simulations and tests and so on to prove this would work. In fact, this system of using 2x4s end on, and originally if you go to Vancouver and go to Gastown and look up, you see these 2-foot square cedar beams running across, and then 2x4s end on. It was actually a traditional construction system used in the turn of the last century. And then, so if the beams are running, the beams ran this way so that way the daylight could get all the way in, so that the top of the slab is 12 feet up. And what that allows us to do is get really deep daylight penetration. But then, of course, is, well, how do you run air systems if they're going to run along the bars? And the answer is a raised floor system. So we worked with Hayward, which was a donor to the project, and sold us a raised floor system at cost. The only thermal mass in the system is that these raised floor tiles, instead of just being carpet, are actually an inch of concrete. And that gives us a little bit of a thermal mass information. Another reason wood matters a lot in British Columbia is pine beetle, which I'm assuming you have issues with here in Idaho as well. So this is the map in 2006 of how many acres had been killed from pine beetle die-off. And so there's all this wood that's mostly cosmetically damaged, waiting to be used, and if we don't use it, it will go up in fire. And so in some sense, the act of building with wood, given this reality, is an act of carbon sequestration. Right? We're taking something that will either burn and go back into the atmosphere, and we're encasing it and will behold as a long life building. So here's, the neat thing is the quality that it gives the space, which is we can expose all this structure, and here's the commons areas, multi-story space, and this is sort of the typical when it's divided up into private offices. 12-foot ceilings, that's that 2x4 edge on, an acoustic cloud on top, one little light bulb to light it, when the photographer's there, I guess, and so on, and then operable windows low and high. This is it under construction, and you can see the system, all of the insulation is outside of the structure, so that it minimizes thermal bridging. So that's Roxel, that's waste product from power plants and steel mills, spun into an orange pad. And then there's a frame, and then this is a new product that had been developed by the BC forestry people. It's red cedar that's been put into a cross-lam panel and then sealed in a marine varnish, which makes it really. I got off the airport and I stepped outside. You have this amazing parking structure that's been painted this amazing bright orange, and I'm like, oh, it's just like a circle. The building's a bit orange, I have to confess, but you can see the waterproofing layer, the insulation, and then a rain screen, and then these wood panels, and they're all clipped in so that at some point, they will have to be refinished. Because early on, we have parts of the UBC campus. This part gets a special kind of precast concrete brick made locally. But for this part, we wanted to use wood. We had this long debates about what a sustainable cladding is for a building. They said, well, obviously it's got to be brick or concrete. And I went around and took pictures around the UBC campus of the concrete buildings, all the brutalist buildings in the 60s. And a lot of them were failing. All the joints where the beautiful precast panels were meeting each other. So on. I said, this is not a no maintenance building. It's a building that hides your lack of maintenance until the galvanized clip fence. And so maybe part of sustainability is you have to make a commitment that, 10, 15 years from now, you pull these panels off, strip them, and reseal them. Right? That's part of the act of doing it. It's a different way to think about it. But universities are used to it, like, they can get a donor to pay for a project up front. Sometimes it's hard to get the donor to pay for maintenance. But it's it was an interesting discussion to have had. So if you do the accounting, if you make the assumption that this building is going to stand for a long time, really it's staying for whatever, how many hundred years to keep this structure inside, this is the amount of CO2 that's sequestered in the wood structure. This is the amount of CO2 that was emitted by making the concrete and the glass and the aluminum and the brick. And so the accounting is done such that it just turns out that it's actually slightly carbon negative in its construction, if you do the accounting this way. The other way is, traditionally people just say that wood has a low embodied energy. You have to cut the things down and so on. But if you think about if we're making long-lived buildings, not houses that are going to be knocked down in 50 years and burned, it's a kind of a form of carbon sequestration. So the ventilation system, the auditorium is air conditioned. Meaning you get 500 people in there working away, it can get pretty hot. So that system is air conditioned through a ground source heat pump. But all of the main laboratory and office spaces these bars are 30 feet wide, so very easy for cross ventilation. And there still is a system for when you seal off for very cold weather, you feed in fresh air through the underfloor of your ventilation system. The west facade was kind of tricky, and they wanted to do, the architects and firm, the design heads really wanted to do an all-glass facade. I said, this space can we compromise? So what we came up with was a strategy of an active shade, where the activeness comes not from moving parts, but from living systems. So you can see a little bit here that at each story level, there's basically a huge planter, and then set up with lines to call front. And the theory is as it grows in, that will end up with a system that in the wintertime will let winter light through, and the summertime will block it from overheating. There is some active solar, but here I want to go. This is why I set up the talk with this discussion about when you can, how much solar can take you, especially in the Pacific Northwest. So the energy model said the whole building annually, given its lecture theater, its cafe, and all that kind of stuff. Here's how much energy you're going to use: about 500 megawatt hours per year of electricity. So you can do a quick calculation using a simulator and say, if we just have a kind of a flat roof thing up at this latitude, we're going to basically cover the entire site with solar panels like they did at the Bullet Foundation. What's the peak generating capacity of all those modules that I need to be able to make that much energy in a year? And the answer is about 500 kilowatts peak power. That would take 37,000 square feet of solar panels. The only problem is the building footprint is only 15,000 square feet. And in fact, given that we said this is a green roof down here, there's only about 9 or 10,000 square feet of roof area here. So we said we can't get to net zero that way. But we can at least use solar in an interesting way, getting double duty out of things. So one thing that we did was we said we needed to provide shade on these windows so that winter sun can come in, but summer sun is blocked so it doesn't overheat. And we had in our budget, we had only allocated, we could only buy 25 kilowatts peak power, not 500 kilowatts peak power. But what we're going to do is we're going to use that to make the solar shading device that we're going to make anyway. But instead of making it out of aluminum, we make it out of solar panels. So the solar panel will provide the shading, but we also generate the power. Now, the way that the scheme for how we would get to net zero was kind of living off of that little land, which was we looked next door, and I said, what's that? And they said, oh, that's the Earth and Ocean Sciences building. That building has 28 fume hoods, all putting out 1,000 cubic feet per minute of fresh air, exhausting out the fume hoods. I said, they must have one hell of a heat recovery system on that. And they said, why no? We just redid the whole HVAC system on the roof of that building and decided we didn't have the money to put on a heat recovery system. And so I said, we can solve that problem. So what we did was we put a heat recovery system on the centralized exhaust for the building. We steal their waste heat, bring it into our building, use it if we need it. If it's got more than we need, we store it in a little ground source field underneath the building if we need it for cooling anyway. And then, when they're ready, we pump the excess back to them in their air intake and preheat their air intake. And so this is my slide, but so the way that it looks like a tailgate, the way that this works is the stealing low-grade heat. We are all services an all-electric building. It then brings and stores in this ground source field and then hands back heat with preheating, which turns down the amount of natural gas that the central plant has to consume. And so if everything works as advertised, what will happen is we'll use 500 megawatt hours a year of electricity. The campus will use 640 megawatt hours per year less of natural gas. And in BC, their electric mix is over 90% carbon-free already, it's all their hydro. We'll get all the heat we need out of it. So the campus gets a 60,000 square foot new building. The campus CO2 emissions drop by 70 tons per year, and the campus energy consumption drops by about 100 megawatt hours per year. Now, the multimedia component of this program, let's see if I can do this. Oh, wait, no. So just escape, and then Alt-Tab or something? Oh, I have to look, I have to find where the mouse went. Oh, there it is. Wait. There. Oh. Okay, now then to continue back, I Alt-Tab.
Yep.
Oh, escape again. Yeah.
Zoom.
Oh, there we are.
All goes well.
From current slide. Very good. Oh, yeah. Yes.
There it is.
Good. Okay. Next. So that was opening day to release that video. I watched it remotely, shed a tear. Sensitive new age music. Over here. So it's been fully occupied for a little over a year now, and I spoke with the person who has been studying the building for how it performs, and she's told me. I mean, the good news she said is she's been doing post-occupancy evaluations of buildings all over campus. This building by far has the highest occupant satisfaction rating of any building they've ever measured. So I felt very good about that part. The occupants love daylighting, they love the air quality, the operable windows, and they said they just love that it's beautiful. They love the quality of the space, the wood, and so on, that they feel they're in a very modern building, but they also feel, that they're surrounded by kind of like a forest and so on. So it sort of messes with their minds. But they don't love. So I was visiting with the IDL today and talking to them about their work on commissioning lighting systems. And, the SIRS building has got, of course, the state-of-the-art everything. It's on the leading edge of everything. So, for example, every light fixture in the building has an IP address, an internet address you can talk to it. And you can tell it, what behavior is supposed to do, you can tell it, and so on. But the people who were programming it never quite got it programmed right. They're still working on it. And so it got to a point where the story that I was told this yesterday during the summer was that when the occupancy sensor in the bathroom went off, all the lights in the wing went off. And so they just went to a mode where basically if that wing is occupied, the lights are on full on. And so the lighting energy use that's been tracked is high. So they're still working on commissioning that system. The water systems, basically this is a very small public utility. Right? It's an entire water purification system that has to meet provincial standards, and it's got a sewage treatment system that has to meet provincial standards. And they are still in discussions. During the design phase, they engaged all of the regulatory authorities, and they're still looking at it. They're still testing everything. They say, yeah, it's testing everything, but we still want to let it run for a while longer. So it's all running, but it's not actually hooked up. Meaning it's not that everyone's drinking from the water they're collecting. They're just flushing it through. So they're still waiting on the regulatory approvals. That's kind of a lesson in itself. The energy systems are still being commissioned. So the good news is that the energy consumption for the building is far below what a typical building of that building type might be. It's still above what the model said because the lighting's not all the time. But the part that's really not working at all yet is the whole wacky scheme of stealing waste energy and handing it back to them. Waste energy harvesting is harvesting significantly less warm water than the model said it should, and they're still testing and trying to figure out what's going on. And then the energy export, when they have waste energy collected and they're ready to sell it back to the adjacent building through what seems to be just a cock-up in the drawings, the warm water is delivered to the cooling coil of the air handling unit, so it can only be used when it's so cold outside that they would never need to run the cooling system. So they designed how they're going to revise that and recommission it. So what I've learned from this story is not untypical, but what I'm about to go on to since then, is that obviously the more sophisticated you make something, the more ways it can break, and the harder it is to get it to work right. And so you need in projects like this to hold back more money than you can possibly believe, like maybe 5% of the cost of construction, and hold it in a pot back and have it there for all the work you'll need to do to make new things that are on the leading edge get them to work right, because it takes a while and it takes staff. In Canada, they have a special challenge because it turns out that to meet their union rules at that campus, they will have to have, if they actually operate it as a public utility, the water system alone has to have 3 full-time staff to watch it, for 3 shifts a day. And we're trying to get them to figure out a way that they can just have a service that looks after it and so on. But there were interesting social sides to this that we never envisioned when we were drawing all our diagrams. We sort of never looked at the union contract that governed the facility staff. And so that was kind of a lesson to us too. So the good news is it's a pretty good building. The bad news is that there's a lot of technology there that's still being shook down. and they need people who will champion that and so on, and they're working on it. But it's hard because, like every project we work on, raising the money up front is a lot easier than raising money to go redo something. And that's why, as designers, we often pick conservative choices because you know that money won't be there. But they're on it, and they still do a lot. So this leads to the final sort of third of the talk. But what I want to talk about is what I think can apply from this kind of obviously exemplary building, in a sense it's an example of both good and bad of what it is to be out on the front edge, that applies to everyday work. This is a study that was published by the New Buildings Institute that you have a relationship with, I know, here. They studied 100 new buildings. This is published back in 2006, 2007, something like that. And they gathered all the computer models of how much energy used per square foot the different buildings, because they were all kinds of different buildings here. How much energy used per square foot the computer model said that building should use. And then after the building was fully occupied and they measured for a year, how much energy did it actually use? And if they were perfect predictors, it would go big, 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 big. But in fact, it's this huge scatter chart. And in fact, when you fit the one to the other, you get a regression coefficient of an R squared of 0.33. For those of you who forgot that part in college, the regression coefficient is the part that if it's 1, it means this thing is a perfect predictor of the outcome. If it's 0, then the thing you're measuring that you're varying has nothing to do with the outcome. 0.33 means that 1/3 of the variation in observed energy performance is attributable to what the energy model said, meaning attributable to the design. 2/3 of the variation in energies of these LEED certified buildings is something other than the design. So what's the something other, right? So I don't know if you like to watch public TV, but Agatha Christie's Great Detective, next to me is a different place sounds moving. It's like an Agatha Christie novel because you're in the drawing room and there's all the suspects, and they're all very plausible suspects. It could be it's the architect's fault. The architect just designed a bonehead idea. The engineer got it wrong. He didn't design something right. He had the heat to the building. It could be the energy modeler didn't model what actually the designers intended, that they did something easier to get the computer program to fit, because sometimes energy models are hard to get it to do the right thing. It could be the contractor didn't build what was wrong with the lines. It could be that the building operations staff, I've seen this happen a number of times, go, God, this doesn't look like the building that I used to run. The building I used to run, you do this. And they reset it back to the building they know, because if you make them look stupid, they don't like you. So they want, if you make a building that makes the operator look stupid, you will turn it into a stupid building. So you have to make the building operator smart. Or it could be those pesky occupants doing, being selfish or trying to eat too much or something like that. So these are all plausible suspects. Okay, so who's the fault? Well, when I first got to New Orleans, just finishing our contribution to make it like the Brad Pitt neighborhood in the Lower Ninth Ward. And a year or two later, we were proud when our project was featured in Green Source magazine as the lowest energy user in the Lower Ninth Ward. We said, God, we are so smart, we are genius. And so in this case, this was the electricity used, and that was the PV generated on top, and they had a little bit of gas because it was an inline water heater and so on, but the EUI was 3, right? And the national average for single-family homes is 42. We are genius. Then they built 2 more of the same house. And then we went and instrumented another one after the magazine report had come out. And it was 60 kV2 per square foot per year. It was the second highest energy user in the entire neighborhood. We must be idiots. But if we had built this one first, the building was different, right? It was the occupant, there were other things going on in the system. So it must be those occupants, right? So there are these studies where they've done. These are 10 homes, identical homes built for Habitat for Humanity. These were 10 homes with solar panels on top, built in Sacramento by SMUD, in association with SMUD. And these are the actual energy use measured, right? So this guy was a net-zero house, this guy was a not very great house, and so we all the same house. So a lot of this is occupant choices matter, obviously. So Clark Brockman and Sarah, who've done a lot of the building challenge projects, has a really great chart that I steal freely and recycle because we don't recycle it. He says, so here's this huge gap between what happens, the actual energy use of buildings and what the energy modeler predicted. So in between there's this chain, the modeler, the engineer, the architect, the owner, and so on. And in theory, they're all talking to each other, kind of playing phone. Now, in reality, they don't talk to each other all that much. And part of the problem is they all had a different idea of what was going on in their heads. So part of the challenge as the design team is trying to break that and get them to see the same thing. We're talking about occupant choices. Let me talk about sometimes it is the building operator or something about the machinery as it's been set up. This was Eskew was Ripple's first LEED certified building. Dr. Nancy Foster of Florida Keys Environmental, it's a visitor center and a research lab down in Florida Keys. And the day it opened, this is the building if it had been built code minimum, and this was the computer model said. I haven't put in the month-to-month variation, but it was supposed to be kind of 20% below code. Good on us. And for the first 2 months, it was doing okay. And then, in the third month after the building was open, the building controls company came by and said, "I have a brand new release of our software. Here, let me install it for you." And as they installed the latest release of the building management software system, they overwrote the settings of everything in the system for the entire building. And so the owner contacted and said, there's something a little weird because my energy bills just shot up. I'm using kind of twice what you guys said I should accept. And they called up the commissioning agent. They said, "Can you take a look at it?" And he says, "I'm in Atlanta. They're in the Florida Keys. Listen, I'll come down on my own time, but I can't, pay for my own air ticket. Can you just buy me the air ticket, the $300 air ticket, to come down from Atlanta?" And the guy said, "I'm a government agency. I don't have a budget for that, so I can't pay $300 to bring you down." So instead, they ran for a year like this, and then the building operator looked at his budget and he found that he had services of an IDIQ contract, an indefinite quantity contract, a local energy modeler, a local energy consultant. And he came by and said, these guys don't know what they're doing. Let me change all the settings for you. And that was here. And that was when the mold bloom occurred. And after the men in the bunny suits had decontaminated the building, they found the $300, flew the guy down, and the building has run like a top. In fact, it's 40% below code rather than 20% below code. So whose fault was that time? Well, it was like, is it the fault because they designed a system that's so opaque that one little flip of the switch can make the building display in this way? Maybe. Whatever it is, this is just a cautionary tale that if we had looked here, we would have said, God, we're idiots. Now that we're over here, we say, gosh, we're geniuses. But in between is the real world of real buildings. This is true. This is we built a very similar building type in Apalachicola. And again, for the first few months, this time we were watching like a hawk. We said, we're not going to do this to us again. So we were tied in for the first 4 months and got it down. And ever since then, it's actually performed. It's using less energy than the energy model predicted. So it's performing bang on. But again, it required that level of engagement. Normally, architects, we get the photographs. And before the messy people get in to mess up our photographs, we're long. And so the idea that we would go back and continue to evolve is sort of a strange thing for their clients. This is a building not by us, but by a very respected local firm in New Orleans, a 1912 building renovated beautifully to a LEED Gold project. And that was the model. This is the average energy use of university buildings. This is if they built that whole building brand new to current code. And they said renovated, even though it's a 100-year-old building and it's single glazing, we can get to there. However, this was the actual build the first year. This was the build the second year. And this is the build now. And what happened over the course of time was a bunch of things got set on in this schedule and so on. But everyone was too busy. We never get people to move together for a meeting. And finally, about 18 months in, they got everybody to reset everything correctly. And they did it. But of course, nobody got a raise for making this work. And that's part of the problem when we work with these high-performing buildings is that the incentive structures in our clients' organizations need to be set up so that it's in everybody's interest. The guy who took extra time to get this building working right didn't get a bonus. Right? That's wrong. Right? You should. So we're now starting to get huge quantities of data thanks to the soon-to-be Von-Mayer blueprint, passing Public Law 84, where every building over 50,000 square feet in New York City has to report its actual energy use. So you can actually look up online the energy use of the Empire State Building for the fund, find the addresses. And this has had a transformative effect in the New York City market, because what happens is people find this is the energy use per square foot of multifamily apartment buildings. And people on the same street, same vintage buildings, one of them uses twice the energy that the other one does. And the owner says, hey, Charlie, how come my energy bills are so high? The first answer is Con Ed is screwing us. And then the guy says, yeah, but that building on the street only uses half as much energy. He goes, well, their building's different than ours. And then he says, no, let's go walk down there and see. It's identical. And then people take out people's excuses. And then they say, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. heard somebody once say that it's Oppenheimer said the secret of the atomic bomb is because so much of the time we stop ourselves from trying because it's just not possible. But when we see that other people are doing it, we can get there. So, in fact, this is a study of 50 school buildings in Toronto, where these were all built in the same 10-year period, so pretty much the same budgets. They weren't identical floor plans, but they were the same standards. When the principal of this school was told this was her school, within 6 months she's implemented low-cost, no-cost measures to move her here. This is the power of the Great Schools Challenge. And so this was just operational changes and awareness. This was the pencil diet in action. I didn't know that other people, could do this, and if they can do it, I can do it. Now, even within, you can talk about variations with building, but there's variations among occupants. You can always say a guy had 10 houses. Well, maybe they were built by different crews. The crew that built, house number 10 in that study was drinking that day. That's why that building doesn't work. Well, so here we have, this is a 250-unit apartment building. So it's one building envelope. It's one building mechanical system. But every unit inside this 250-unit apartment building is its own little heat pump. You have a neutral water that goes through the building. You dump heat into it when it's too hot in their apartment, you suck heat out of it. And these are two interns that worked with EBR last summer, and this was the gatekeeper of that building. We became friends. We found that she had a weakness for smoothies from Jamba Juice on the ground floor. And so once a month we went and visited Kaylin, and we would make a smoothie, and she would leave the key to the electrical rooms and go drink her smoothie, and we would run through the building, pick us a flash, and read 250 meters, and then log the data. And from this, we can start to acquire real information. We don't know who the occupants are, so their anonymity is preserved. But we get data. And so this is an histogram of the energy used per square foot of all these apartment dwellers. So this is 60 of the apartments use about this much energy per square foot. And there's 1 or 2 out here and like 5 over here. So I don't know what they're growing inside this apartment. It's pretty good, right? And these people might be just people coming and going a lot. But so what's interesting is this is the median benchmark of multifamily units in the ARBEX database. This is the median of this histogram. So this is how good the building is. This is how good the occupants are. So we can start using this kind of data analysis to peel these things apart, right? So I got really intrigued with this power of just don't look at enough stuff to learn things. And so I told the story. I'd been teaching a little seminar at Tulane, and I went and had a Rolletta sandwich. It's a sandwich we have in New Orleans with the guy who for 20 years had been teaching the building science course in the architecture department. We chatted interviewed for about 40 minutes, and then he said, "You could teach my course. I could get out of teaching that course. You could teach my required building science course." And so I had just written a grant to go get some widgets from a grant to NCAR to get a whole bunch of widgets for my little seminar to go consume in a few buildings. But instead, what I had was 64 students a semester. So what I did was we made 16 teams, 4 students each, and we assigned them a whole bunch of different projects. They do labs every Friday. This is a girl riding her bicycle and learning, judging thermal comfort while studying airflow in a different metabolic rate. And here they're looking at a water wall and measuring the radiant temperature off buildings. Here they're instrumenting a library for occupancy patterns to understand potential savings from occupancy sensors. Here they're instrumenting enthalpy recovery ventilator to document performance, and so on. So they pick study sites all around New Orleans and the rest of the city. And all different kinds of buildings, single-family houses, big institutional buildings, libraries, and so on, traditional homes, state-of-the-art apartment buildings, and so on. And they do studies where they look at the numbers and look at psychrometric charts. They can all spell, architects can all spell the word psychrometric. Psychrometric charts documenting comfort, also documenting these are 4 identical homes built by global reading. 2 of them have the same occupant pattern, meaning a husband and a wife, similar jobs, similar incomes. One uses twice as much energy as the other. And then running, this is the old joke. Anecdote is not data, right? But we learned them from anecdotes. So they use Facebook to do comfort surveys where they sent out studies of the architecture building itself, and asking people about their thermal comfort, and people use those interesting acronyms. In fact, you learn a lot from that, and trusting users and trusting occupants teaches you so much about how the buildings are really working. And so on. So From that, one of the buildings they studied was the New Orleans Bioinnovation Center. Now, building a laboratory, this is, every dot on this chart is 1 hour of the year. This is temperature, and this is the moisture content of the air. And these are lines of relative humidity going on. This zone is when you're comfortable in summer clothing, and this is if you're comfortable wearing more clothing in winter-style clothing. Passive strategies can, in theory, apply around here. You can either keep from solar heating, you could do evaporative cooling when it's drier, warm but still dry, but once it's hot and humid, nothing you can do. This is the energy it takes to dehumidify if you have a thing that's bringing in 1 cubic feet per minute of air continually all year long. Here's how much energy it takes to bring that into the kind of neutral temperature and develop that 50% relative humidity. The only worst place to build a lab is land, because labs move lots of air to keep people safe. So, in fact, when we did the energy model for this building, the New Orleans Bioinnovation Center, if they did the typical thing of running 12 to 16 air changes per hour all the time, based on the kind of worst case of what chemicals you might be using in the lab, this is how much energy they would use. But we realized that this is a center where everybody can rent a little lab space for their little startup. They all have different needs. And so what we said is there's a diversity of needs. So what we want to do is let people set their own ventilation policy in consultation with their own safety officer. And from that, every little 1,000 square foot lab they can set the kind of typical airflow change for bulk change. They also have a panic button. No matter what was set here, if they hit the panic button, it takes the building up to 12 air changes per hour and maximizes the air exhaust on the few that's in that room. And every little cellular lab has control of its own temperature. And by giving them that degree of control and assuming a diversity of needs and occupancy sensors, we can bring down the energy used for ventilation tremendously. So that, in fact, here's the energy used per square foot of typical homes, offices, libraries, hospitals. Here's the average lab. Here's the measured energy used in the New Orleans Bioinnovation Center. You know it's in one of those challenging climates. And that's because we're paying attention and giving control to users. Now, we did all these comfort surveys working with the students, and we found, an amazing fraction of people actually are comfortable. But we were interested to find out there was a place that was cool, and we knew what was going on there. There was this one lab that was reporting that was too hot. We went to the building management system, and Darnell, logs into it. He says, they can't be too hot. We shut off the reheat valve on their air handling units. Look, it says so right here. And we went into the lab, and it's too hot. And there's a very successful start, kept adding more and more equipment. And so we assumed it was the equipment. In fact, they told us it's because of all this equipment, but we're growing, we need more equipment, so we have to go add more air conditioners to our unit. And we picked up the radiant sensor and aimed it at the air outlet and measured it, and it's dumping 85-degree air into the room. And Darnell says, that's not possible. The control software says the hot water valve is shut. And the answer is no, but the building management systems had issued an order to the solenoid to close. And he took the order that he had issued as the reality of what was going on in the lab. They found that the valve was stuck up, and so it was always heating. So the space was uncomfortable. So it wasn't that people were being greedy and demanding more cooling than they had the right to. It was that the system was malfunctioning. And despite the high level of automation, it was still, you can imagine, we had a sensor to measure the flow in that line or something. But in the end, the people are really cheap sensors. They'll tell you it's something wrong. And so building feedback mechanisms, that's what's so exciting, what the work I'm seeing at the IDL, connecting between the computer world says what the people say and the comfort, can get you to real range of savings. So this is the closing slide, which is that, architects frequently talk about their designs as their baby. Now, if you think about it, when we talk about the development of any design, the first phase is conceptual design, concepts. And so we think of it, babies our buildings are our babies, and conception, the moment of conception is often a very pleasurable moment. I'm informed by some women that the moment of substantial completion, it can be painful, and that's true in the world of architecture. But, if you had produced a beautiful new child, you would say, oh, what a great child. Let me take the photograph. Okay, found it all. Right? And yet that's what most architects do. Right? They're done the day the building opens. They've got the photograph, they're gone. And if they go back, they'll just find something wrong. might just be liability and so on. But instead, if we stop thinking of architecture as a one-night stand, think about it more like a long-term relationship, then it opens up a whole different way for how buildings are built. And it's what we're trying to do as a firm. We have no idea how to get paid. We've noticed that certain clients are really pleased that they're doing it and seem to be directing more and more return business to us rather than our competitors. So as a form of indirect marketing is how we're logging the work that we do on this for now. Eventually, once you demonstrate this works enough times, there'll be a way to convince people to charge them. But for now, we're just doing it. Partly because it's the right thing to do, and partly because we think it's in our own self-interest. But I think that this is an opportunity. It's kind of a mouth-watering business opportunity for design firms to get involved, because we know more about what the intention of the building was than anybody else. And so we can stay, and we also often have a much better human-to-human relationship with the client than the contractor does, than the engineer does. So I think that finding a way to link architects in over the life of the building is sort of the real big front to getting to high-performing buildings. Thank you very much.
All right, with that, we cue the lights. That work. And then, so we've got some time for some questions to our online webinar viewers. If you'd like to type in your questions, it's the only way you'll be able to ask. You'll be muted the whole time. And to everyone here in the audience, if you would please raise your hand and we'll have the mic come to you so our online listeners can catch it. I'll turn this mic down a bit. We'll take our first question. Okay, so we have a question. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Excellent. So I'm really curious about how energy modeling was used in the service building, and who did the energy modeling? What was it like? How were they integrating the team? Were the architects doing energy modeling? So on and so forth.
Yeah. So I have slides of that, but I will just say, Busby got thrown by Parkinsonville. Busby as a firm had a really great collaborative relationship with a structural firm called Post-occupancy, and a mechanical engineering firm that was Keen, called Keen Engineering, KEN. During the cycle of the final version of the service building, Keen got bought by Stantec. And so, as they used to say, they are formerly Keen. And they weren't so Keen anymore. So we worked with nominally Stantec, but they were really the Keen engineers. We met every week. We had an integrated design meeting. The design process went on over the course of 9 months on this project. And we met either every other week or every week, depending on where we were in the cycle. We had multiple energy models at every stage of the meeting. The way that we divided it up was that basically we were interested in we would ask them generic questions like, if the average R value of the wall is X, give us a little chart. We assume that it's 30% glass and 70% opaque wall. We want a study that looks at the energy consumption versus the R value. What would be kind of point of diminishing returns? And so we would ask a question like that, and they would do a series of studies like that. We would then work on our own, and working with we had a building envelope consultant, Hirschfeld, where we used the frame at the energy modeling software to look at the thermal transfer. So one of the things about the first building was that it turns out if you try to make a wall that's higher than R20, it's actually really, really hard. Because all the little things that might hold out the brick ledge or the things that the cladding will clip to, those short circuit everything. So you can have R40 nominal insulation, and it's still an R20 wall because all the little clips penetrating. So we did a lot of two-dimensional modeling working with Hirschfeld, did the envelope explorations. Stantec did the consequences of it having this effective R value. And then the other part of the equation was, well, how much glass do we need? So early on in the discussion, there was a lot of excitement about using the wall. It was this like triple four-layer, glass, film glass thing. We could do curtain walls as well, and make a good R value. But what we did was a series of studies that we said, we can use this thing that has a very good R value, but we need so much more glass to get to the daylight levels that it's actually better to just use dual glazing, where we get the higher transmission and have less glass. And so to do that study, we did the daylighting studies ourselves using gradients. And then we did physical models to validate them, because the really dangerous thing about having architects do energy modeling is that they only do it once a week. And so any of these programs, you can get the wrong answer to 4 decimal places. And so it came out of the computer, it must be right. So it's really great. You build a quick plumb core model, and I have some pictures of some of my cohorts up on the roof measuring, doing ground truth in different sky conditions and then comparing it with their radiance model. So we had that element inside, and we let the outside firms, they used IDS, I think was the package there, and then Trendsys to understand the energy interchange with the ground system.
During occupancy hours, what ranges of temperatures do you allow the building space to
get to? That's always, in the service building, I actually don't know what their policy is. It shows it. There's always been the issue of, how big a dead band you're willing to accept. Now, the service building is a real special case because almost all of the people originally were scheduled to be, environmental group people, right? That Department of Sustainable this and Department of Environment this and that. We're all going to be housing the building. So, as a study group, that's not that great because if they're already all committed, well, of course they can be virtuous and be willing to put on spiders and all that. So, but to make the economics work, like the campus grants office got assigned one floor, and they said, and everyone was saying, oh, this is terrible. I said, no, this is great. We have a control group. And so you have people who are not willing to give up on comfort. I actually don't think that, my experience so far, so many buildings are so misperforming that if we could just get to that they were performing as they were supposed to, then we could worry about, we can save a little bit more energy if we were willing to give up a little bit on comfort. There are these great studies, rigor at UC Berkeley, where they found that if people see that a window is operable, and you just have the study of how temperature ranges they're comfortable in, their comfort range expands, not that they open the window, but that they see that they have control, because part of comfort is inside our brain. Right? And so I think they're getting ready to do this, but my main understanding is that they have not made actually any heroic compromise. I think that they're beating the 20C or whatever it is there and so on. I don't think that they are they're trying to make people squeeze on comfort. But like so many people are doing these studies where you have one floor of a building compete against another, or what things they can do by turning the thermostats, or more importantly, turning off the lights. So to me, we're not outside the comfort zone. I think the real problem right now is just get the system to be as responsive as it needs to allow individual decisions to happen.
A question about the building. Yeah, you made a comment about, might be a good idea to hold 5% budget back to fix stuff afterwards. To me, that seems to fly in the face of total building commissioning. I was curious, what was that building?
It's still in commissioning, technically. And I think the issue is that IDL, I was chatting with IDL when I got here, and we've done studies where you found that things are broken, where the lights aren't actually programmed in the way that they were supposed to be. And the scope of the grant is to verify, but it wouldn't correct a design flaw or fundamentally, a fundamental sort of misdesign choice. So what commissioning can do is find something wrong, and then you can get people. It's a simple matter of resetting a little bit of software. If it's a matter that they were trying to do something that's never been tried before, and they realized that they just made a wrong guess or whatever, it can quickly turn into liability.
make this?
I think it is total building commissioning, but you need to.
We can continue this discussion
Outside. Hey, grab the refreshments as you come.
All occupants walk to the nearest stairwell exit. Do not use the elevator. Walk to the nearest stairwell exit. Do not use the elevator. Walk down to the first floor. Exit the building to the southwest parking lot. Attention, attention,